My brutally honest opinion on Spider-Man 2 and what you should expect in the next 30 days for this game, and how this game could also have the perfect Spider-Verse crossover. If you could leave a like on this video, it helps a lot, so I'd really appreciate it. But if you didn't like the video at the end, then feel free to turn your like into a dislike. But if you could drop a like right now, it helps a ton. Now this year more or less is done, and that jaw-dropping trailer for Spider-Man 2 that we also anticipated to release near the end of this month now seems incredibly unlikely, though Insomniac are actually still tweeting on Twitter, and what's interesting is we could say, well, they are scheduled tweets etc, which they very likely are, and most of the team are undoubtedly on their holiday now, but they are still interacting with a few tweets here and there. But what's interesting is they are going heavy on the promo for the PC version of Miles Morales. Does it mean anything for Spider-Man 2? Absolutely not. They're just trying to ramp up the sales for that game. So just to everyone out there, let's not look into that too deep, I guess you could say. Now, with that said, here is what the next 30 days look like for news on this game, as well as a trailer. Now, Sony seems to be giving off the smell that they are following in the footsteps of God of War's marketing, which in hindsight is actually bad news, as it's basically Sony being radio silent and politely saying, we know you're still going to buy the game, whether we do promo for it or not. And if that is the case, that's a big issue. Yes, most people will still buy the game if it has no promo until, let's just say, the week of its release, for example. But from a fan perspective, it's painful, and there is nothing for fans to be anticipated for, in the sense of like how we had the first trailer and how people found Easter eggs and that led to more hype, etc. That's what I'm talking about, the build up basically. So in that perspective, I really hope we're not going down God of War's marketing route, because I guess on the grand scheme of things, that is already way more of an established title compared to Marvel Spider-Man, right? So the version that they own. Now, being brutally honest, going down that type of marketing route, in my opinion, is a terrible idea. The only reason I say so is because despite it being a very big IP, it still relates back to communication, and if we use, say, Marvel's Avengers as an example, that too being a big IP actually showed how a lack of communication and even marketing to an extent for their DLCs led to a downfall and increase in unawareness for certain aspects in the game. So if we go down that route, it kind of contradicts, well, you know, it's a already established game, etc. It's going to do well. Well, arguably, you could have said that with Marvel's Avengers, which, on the grand scheme of things, it did, of course. However, when things started to fizzle out and that communication with no news and build-up led, you know, ultimately to a big downfall. Now, the next 30 days, however, which seems more likely, is this. We're simply going to get a gameplay trailer followed by screenshots, and then what I assume is going to happen is complete radio silence until, say, spring. Now yes, that is still painful to an extent, but it bridges the wait until they go heavier on promo, and it just leaves people talking. Now what we do know, for the most part, is it's very much likely the situation where Sony is way more in control here than Insomniac, at least in my opinion. Now I say the next 30 days, and the reason why I say that and why, for example, me as an individual is actually looking forward to, or should I say anticipating that anyway at least, is because of everything that's led up towards the end of this year. We went from no information to information, then them just confirming the release window, not even a date. Of course, the theory at that point was then Sony want to start off 2023 with a bang. Hence why I say a trailer / gameplay video as well as screenshots, because there's no doubt it will go radio silent until a PlayStation showcase, where at that point they will have, let's say, like a 20-minute long gameplay video. But we're not going to see any raw gameplay until then, which is why I say January, a mixture of a gameplay trailer and just normal CGI trailer in general. Maybe like just over a minute, let's say like a minute and 50 seconds for example, something along those lines. Now, Glenn from Screen Rant posted an article which said, Marvel's Spider-Man 2 could have the perfect Spider-Verse crossover. Now he then went on to say that Sony has cross-promoted its Spider-Man movies and games in the past, with almost every MCU suit for Peter appearing in Marvel's Spider-Man, and both Peter and Miles' suits from 2018's award-winning Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse appearing in their own games, complete with a stylization that matched the movie's distinct look. Now with Spider-Man Miles Morales, they took this a step further with the option for the character animation to match the frame rate of the movie, which of course was really cool. And the same thing kind of goes hand in hand with the comic book pop-up graphics when you're actually in combat, etc. So very much like those of the film. Now he went on to say that Marvel Spider-Man 2 could actually use the Spider-Verse DLC. He continued to say it seems almost inevitable that the Spider-Verse inspired suits will return in Marvel Spider-Man 2 alongside other favourite interpretations from Insomniac's earlier games. Insomniac and Sony could go beyond with, of course, new DLC that ties into the film's story. Not much is known about the extent of Insomniac's version of Spider-Man's appearance in, of course, the Across the Spider-Verse, and it could just be a fun cameo for fans akin to the appearance of the advanced suit in the first film. Now, what is interesting is, considering the release date of Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse comes of course months before Marvel Spider-Man 2, fans will likely have seen the film before playing the game. This would allow any Spider-Verse DLC levels to further explore some more backstory for the Spider-Force led by Spider-Man 2099 via an interactive setting, and further showcase the many versions of Spider-Man revealed in the movie's trailer. Insomniac already showed it has the movie's animation style perfected with its past adaptations of the Spider-Verse suits, but whole levels in this art style could be something truly spectacular. And I think he has a very valid point. Here's the thing. We know the first Spider-Man game, though it had great DLCs, I feel like it could have had more DLCs. But that also, even me saying that, would contradict, I guess, the future of where the game's headed, right? Had Marvel Spider-Man, the one that released back on the PlayStation 4 in 2018, had been, of course, the only Spider-Man game, in the sense of there was not going to be a sequel, and it was basically just a one-off game that, of course, was just going to be there for, let's say, at least 5 to 10 years, then, of course, no doubt we would have expected a lot more content. I guess it depends on what they're actually trying to leverage and how they would have a player base in that game. Again, there's plenty of games out there, especially open world games, that have implemented a great strategy to keep a game alive until their next version of the game. I don't want to use GTA as an example, as that game is just on a complete different level, but if we do compare it to that game in terms of replayability and downloadable content, then yes, I guess we could argue the fact that that's a good example. So the point I'm trying to make here is, with Spider-Man 2, I would definitely like to see a lot more DLC, maybe a bit more evenly spread out, as opposed to the release date, well, comes along and then the game's out, and then we get, of course, the end game content, and then we get more DLC as a whole, all kind of crammed within, let's just say, this first maybe 4 or 5 months after the game's released. That's what I wouldn't really like to see. I'd much rather have maybe like one DLC every, let's just say, maybe 4 months, even 5 months after the release would be a lot more reasonable. And then again, if we know we're going to have a sequel to that game, we can have the downloadable content that kind of gives nudges towards that sequel. And I think that would be a great bridge in terms of keeping that player base there while still kind of keeping the name just out there and fresh, rather than a game drops, people play it, a handful of times, and then it gets put aside even after the DLC content. That's what I would like as a fan. How do you guys feel about that? Let me know in the comment section below. But what you want to do is definitely watch the video that you see on screen right now, because you don't want to miss that information.